Okay, so I've done some things that some people might deem as a mistake, and today I wanted to talk about it and kind of own up to some of these things that some people may feel like, yo dog, you was wrong. Because a while back I had cut off a group of friends that I was with, and ultimately I've just been kind of thinking about everything that happened and how it went, and just in general where things went wrong and what are the things that I did that ultimately maybe I could have done differently. And honestly, the reason I even decided to try and do this video was because I've recently been rewatching the Tokyo Ghoul anime. I started off with part 1 of the anime, and before anybody has anything to say of like, why are you watching the anime and not reading the manga, yo dog, that's just what I wanted to do. Oh, and by the way, I also skipped out on Route A because, yeah, well, let's not talk about that. Because with Tokyo Ghoul, I always felt connected to that series. I always felt very personable with the series in general. I always felt like I could relate to Ken Kaneki as a character because he was just so well written, and in general, yeah, rewatching the series just really made me want to even do this video to begin with. And for those that don't know about Tokyo Ghoul, I'll give you a brief summary about it because, well, after all, this is an anime channel, right? Essentially, Tokyo Ghoul season 1 part 1 starts off with Ken Kaneki, a bookworm guy that meets this pretty girl, but shortly after finds out that, yeah, she's a man-eating ghoul, and in general his life gets flipped upside down. And I want to say season 1 came out, what was it, like 2014, 2015, like a while back. And throughout part 1 you just see the character's development and how he changes from, again, this kind of mild-mannered, chill, quiet dude to ultimately just a really tough guy that ain't gonna take nothing from nobody. Like, that guy that's a good guy is still in there, but he just really gets a lot stronger. And I do appreciate the fact that within the part 1 and all the insanity that he went through, that he was introduced to the woman that would eventually become, well, I guess we'll say his queen. But eventually towards the end of season 1, Ken Kaneki goes up against essentially one of the leaders of the people that basically take down ghouls, and he goes up against him in a really crazy and epic battle. But, well, dude was just really strong, and Ken ultimately didn't win that battle in particular. Fast forward a bit, there's a time skip, and the character returns, but this time around he actually doesn't really remember who he used to be. He's going by a whole different name. I think it's Sasaki Heisei, and even has a whole new group of friends at that particular point. Because after the defeat that he took at the hands of that guy, eventually he starts working for the people that go against the ghouls because he doesn't really remember who he is. And with that new friend group he had, there was the characters Psycho, Mutsuki, Urie, and Shirazu. Like, that was the main group that he was with for a good chunk of part 2 of the series. But then slowly but surely throughout Tokyo Ghoul Re, the second part of the story, that he starts to little by little remember who he was and who he actually ultimately is. Because while he was running around with that new name, ultimately the person that he truly was still within him, slowly but surely calling out. And the writing was just done so well because even throughout all of it, the inner turmoil, he was almost scared of finding out about like who he used to be, so to speak. He was pretty much scared of that old version of himself that he didn't even really want to know anything about it. But at some given point in the story, after going through quite a few different journeys with this new group of characters, ultimately the person that he used to be, Ken Kaneki, eventually emerges, and Sasaki Heisei kind of goes away, so to speak, because he remembers like, yo dog, this isn't me, what's going on here? But because of the whole scenario and basically who he was contradicted and went against what this new group of friends he had believed in, ultimately Ken Kaneki had to step away from them. And the way it went was kind of epic, I'm not even gonna lie, because, well, one was when he lost Shirazu, and opposed to kind of being what that Sasaki Heisei character was, where he would kind of probably be, you know, mourning and grieving, it led to him saying that epic quote at one given point. Homie was like, why should I save trash like you? Because his time with this group of characters was very personal. Like, if you wasn't around and really close into this whole thing, there was the character Urie that pretty much was always just hating in the background, always had a problem with him, even though that was like the most distant character. Psycho was, for the most part, the best one of the bunch, I would say. She was pretty much just always like, I just want to play my video games, leave me alone, leave me in my room. And I can't be mad at that, I'm not gonna lie. And then there was Mutsuki. Mutsuki was the one out of all the characters that really looked up to, appreciated, and respected Heisei because of, like, you know, his mind, of how intelligent he was, the person that he was, the good-hearted nature that Mutsuki had seen. But Mutsuki had their own problems in and of themselves, because Mutsuki had their own secret in the series that kind of was like masking their identity throughout the entirety of the story, because nobody else knew about Mutsuki's secret except Heisei, and Heisei was just like, yo, that's still my dog. But the real split in the whole scenario of this friendship group was when Ken finally was like, yo dog, I'm over it, I'm moving on. Because it was after the final battle that Ken had with his mentor that he eventually left and ultimately went back back to the ghoul side. But even that battle was done very well because Arima at the very end still loved him and still looked at him as the son that he is. But the real split in the dynamic of the friendship group, in my opinion personally, is when finally Mutsuki realized that Ken wasn't returning and was kind of bugging out. Like, Urie was on their own path, Shirazu at that particular point had passed, Psycho, again, video games. However, Mutsuki was really desperate for their teacher to return at some given points, even attacking and going crazy of like, yo dog, teach, come back to us, like you're supposed to be here with us. But especially once Ken reunited with Toka, the woman that would eventually be his queen, so to speak, aside from the fact that Ken realized, yo dog, I am who I am at the end of the day. Like, yeah, I started off human, but ultimately I rock with the ghouls and I'm probably more ghoul than anything I was when I was with those people, which pretty much led to, you could argue, Ken saying something along the lines of like, yo, they not like us. But even more so, when he reunited with Toka, he understood that like, yo, this group of people, they're not going to accept her, and on top of that, they're gonna probably go after her and attack her because, well, there's a list of reasons. Her being a ghoul, them probably hating at the end of the day, especially Mutsuki, like, yo, you're supposed to be with me. And so that's where Ken was already like, enough is enough, for lack of better terms, when it came to Mutsuki, especially once she started acting very much so in aggression. It was like, yo dog, you're expired paint, like go away already. Because even though Ken was enormously loyal to this group for an incredible amount of time, ultimately he understood like, this is just the way things are gonna have to be. Because he understood very well like, yo, they're not gonna accept me for me and they're not gonna accept my woman. It's time to leave. And I won't spoil the ending of Tokyo Ghoul, but well, you know, the true ending is a happy ending. And I throw the argument that maybe at some given point him and Psycho could be friends or something. I don't know about that. But now that you hear that whole summary of Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re, again, it just had me reflecting on my own life, my own friendships, and some that I had to leave. Because I started this video off saying that I wanted to address some mistakes I've made, and one of the things that some people might deem as a mistake was the fact that maybe my loyalty towards friends was just well over, above, and beyond. But if you give your all and you try your best and ultimately you do everything possible, regardless of the outcome, you gotta ask, was it a mistake? When we first met, I was kind of lost trying to figure out which way to go.